It's called Optical Oceanography Lab, or OOL, if you turn the letter around. But we are detectives trying to solve some of the mystery in ocean science. But in reality, we are a group of scientists, engineers, and students trying to work on ocean science, conduct research, using primarily optics and remote sensing. Okay. These are some of the current research topics we focus on. Bioptical properties of coastal inland waters, optical remote sensing algorithms and products, and you see this in my talk. Primarily on algal blooms and river plumes. Algal blooms means many things, micro, macro, different colors. Then ecosystem connectivity and its relationship to climate change. Then from this, we form our own coastal ocean observing systems. And then from this observing systems, we address some episodical events such as oil spills, red tides, green tides. Okay. Now back to the topic, green tides and brown tides. What are these? What are green tides and golden tides? They are everywhere. They are macroalgae blooms of different colors. Green tides have green macroalgae. Brown tides or golden tides are golden, yellowish when they're young. When they're adults, they become brown. Okay? This happened everywhere around the world, but primarily in two places. One is in this western part of the Pacific. This is the Yellow Sea, the circle. Okay? And back in 2018, this macroalgae bloom became famous around the world because Olympic sailing game was happening in that place. Okay, a lot of reporters gathered together. And you see the problem during the training and during the beaching. Okay? And there were more than 10,000 people deployed to collect this, to mitigate this in a physical way. Okay? So that's the macroalgae of Ava, we call it Ava. Okay? And this is the morphology of Ava, of individual clump, about 20 centimeter size. In the adjacent ocean, this is called East China Sea, there's a golden tide formed by this sargassum, okay? And if you have a CTD, okay, do a profiling, you don't see this sometimes, but you have a CTD got tangled by this sargassum submerged in depths. And once they get on the beach, and you have a problem, you have to remove this. This sargassum species is called Sargassum horneri. Okay? It grows on rocks on the bottom of the ocean. So if you have a windstorm event, it may be detached and float on the surface and keep growing. Okay? So that's the golden tide in East China Sea. And over here, we have sargassum blooms in the Caribbean and in the Gulf of Mexico. Okay? And this sargassum mat or windrow provides a habitat for many marine animals, fish, turtle, shrimp. Okay? It's a critical. And because of this, NOAA does not allow people to collect this in the open ocean. Okay? It's a habitat. Okay? It's called Golden Floating Rainforest of the Atlantic Ocean by the Sargasso Sea Alliance. Okay? And if we zoom in to look at individual clumps, and this is how they look. There are two forms of sargassum in the Atlantic. One is the Sargassum fluitan, looks a little bit thicker, okay, and Sargassum natant. And these are individual clumps, about 10 centimeters in size. But once they form large mats and rafts, you can see those in the windrows. As with many other things, too much of a good thing makes it bad. And if you have a lot of this on your beach, this is exactly what has happened in the Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico in Florida in the past few years. And it becomes very bad for many reasons. It smells bad, just like a red tide. It chases away tourists. and it attracts insects and cause problem in breathing. Okay? It can smother turtle nesting sites. It can cause fish mortality, and it has a lot of negative impacts on tourism economy. Okay? And this is the area. Now, what happened in history? We have plenty of reports from news, from TV channels. Oh, there's a bleaching. People suffer. What happened in history? Where is the large picture? Okay? And this comes to the here. Forget about this. The magic of optics of remote sensing. Okay? And the satellites have been collecting images over the past 30, 40 years, almost every day, everywhere around the world. And the magic is how to turn this satellite image into this interpretable image showing the sargassum abundance in the Gulf of Mexico and in the Yucatan Channel here. Of course, it covers the entire Atlantic. It doesn't take too much effort. It's only a few years. After taking an optical oceanography class, marine resource remote sensing class, after getting trained in all these skills and knowledge, understanding of how optics interacts with algae, with atmosphere, in order to get this from this. Okay. So there are a lot of tricks to make this magic, but we have done that. And with this, we can go back, analyze all satellite imagery back to 20 years ago, and look at the history and look at the large picture. Okay. First, that's the alga, green macroalgae or green tides in history. These are just examples of 4 years by Qi et al. The average concentration of a green macroalgae. The size of this region is about 3 or 4 degrees in each side. It's not very large. But if you look at history, it did not become a bloom until 2008. Then following 2008, you have fluctuations. And this year, where is this year? This year is even higher than 2016. It's somewhere here. Okay. Next one is the golden tide in East China Sea. Again, well, this is larger. This is 10 degrees here. Same thing. Within 1 year, you see the sequence of images showing the progression of this golden macroalgae from this coastal region to an offshore region and become denser. Okay. If you plot the time series, it shows this bloom did not start until 2012. Then there's annual fluctuation. Whereas this year, again, it's very large. So these are the western part of the Pacific. Now, if we move to the Atlantic, what do we see? And this is the most recent result. We see a recurrent Great Atlantic Sargassum Belt extending from West Africa to Gulf of Mexico, making a loop, following the Florida current, going to the North Atlantic and the Sargasso Sea. So that's the peak months during 2018. If we look at history, this is a similar. So it did not start until 2011, then it fluctuated, and the peaks in 2018. Do I have battery? Oh boy. Can't see this pointer, right? Maybe I have a backup. Backup doesn't work. That's not unusual. Maybe the battery is flipped around. No, it is. Well, I have backup battery. Bear with me, please. Good. Works. So where was I? So similar to the other two blooms, this bloom did not start until later in the past 20 years. Okay? So you got to wonder what happened. And in nature, very few events or very few blooms or ocean properties change this abruptly. Okay? If we look at temperature of the ocean, it fluctuates. There's a seasonal cycle. In 100 years, the ocean may change for a degree. If you look at the air property, the CO2 concentration, over the last 50 years, it may change 20%, right? It's a slow, it's a gradual. Nature rarely jumps. But now if we put all these blooms together in one picture, you see this. So I have pondered over these three graphs long enough to get me frustrated. So it's now your turn to think about that. What happened? And what has changed? Are these just small ripples in the long river of history? Or decadal oscillation? Or the ocean's chemistry has some cumulative change to lead to a point of no return? Okay. And talking about the climate change, we say at a certain point, and the climate change may lead to some phenomena of impacts that are irreversible. Have we reached that point already with macroalgae blooms? Has the ocean chemistry become to a point that favors macroalgae bloom? Unfortunately, I do not have answers for all those questions, but I do have some to explain what happened in the past 20 years. Okay? And for the macroalgae bloom in the Yellow Sea, the Ava bloom, green tides, we look at the history, we look at the local aquaculture. So the bloom occurs over here, and upstream of the bloom are the local areas with very heavy aquaculture, seaweed aquaculture. And these are the rafts of the aquaculture. So these are the nori seaweed used to make sushi. Okay. This represents 95% of the sushi, seaweed production in China. Okay. So accompany the nori aquaculture, you have the Ava macroalgae, just like a wheat and wheat. You cannot get rid of this. During the harvest season, people want seaweed. They don't want the macroalgae. So they just collect seaweed, discard the macroalgae, throw away in the ocean. And this part is very turbid. There's no light. But following the ocean current, once the small seed population of macroalgae is transported to this relatively clear water, you have more light, you have nutrient, everything is all right. They just grow crazy to become this. And so this is known. So we know this is due to human activity. Okay. Next, this golden macroalgae bloom, golden tide in the East China Sea. What happened? So this is in February, March, April. So this is a crucial current. So it first appeared in coastal regions over here and transported over here. And during the transport, it grows very fast to become a bloom. So similar to the green tides, there's a lot of aquaculture along this side, different types of aquaculture, okay? And that has increased in recent years. Aquaculture requires fertilizer, just like agriculture. You put fertilizer in the ocean, okay? So there's a eutrophication by human activity in this part. Now, what happened in 2017? That, you have all of a sudden a huge change. 2017 is very warm during the winter. That's the initial growth of this golden macroalgae. So we know the reason here. But what happened to the Atlantic? This becomes so much more complex because the ocean is connected from the Gulf of Mexico to West Africa. Okay? We have looked into so many factors, including dust deposition, and Chris just talked about this. And we have some hypotheses, some speculations, some inference, but we do not have solid conclusions. And that is the pathway for future research. Okay? One of the speculation or hypothesis is the Amazon's contribution to this macroalgae bloom. If you look back to the past, since 1970s, the graph just showed the past 20 years. And in the late years, you can see this Amazon deforestation. It has increased by 25% compared to the first decade. I believe you are all aware of the Amazon fire currently going on. This is more severe than any years before. Now, if we put 2019, it could be somewhere here. Okay? So deforestation will lead to more soil erosion, more nutrient discharge in the ocean. And accompanying this is the increase in fertilizer use in Brazil. Okay? So all this would contribute to more nutrient discharge in the Western Atlantic. So this is one of the major reasons. But there are other major reasons. Okay? There are many factors. We perhaps have just touched 1/4 or 1/5 of a giant elephant size. And we can't tell the whole story yet. But with this, what can we do? Okay, so what? Okay? Even with this limited understanding, we can still do a lot. This is an animation to show the monthly sequence in the last 9 years. I pause for 1 minute so you can watch the animation to see the seasonality of this macroalgae bloom, and also the transport from the tropical Atlantic to the Caribbean and to the Gulf of Mexico. You can see it goes to the west. Okay? So there's a physical oceanography component here. So it loops through. So now with just this observation, what can we do? We can do a relatively long-term prediction. Okay? If something is going on here, we can predict at a later time something must happen over here. Same for the Gulf of Mexico. So this is purely based on observation and statistics. So we have used this concept to develop monthly Sargassum Outlook bulletins and distribute to many stakeholders to warn them 2 months ahead of time, you're going to end up with a lot of sargassum in your ocean. So that's the prediction. And we can certainly do more. We have a real-time observation system, Sargassum Watch system, and the coverage is over here. Of course, this system is not just based on satellite imagery. It is also based on field measurements and the lab measurements to interpret what we see from images. And so here's an example to show Mengqiu in the field to collect this, well equipped, okay, to collect the samples. And also, this system has been used by many stakeholders. So this is just one of the examples to show NOAA and FWC use this to release young turtles. And if they don't release young turtle in the right habitat, the likelihood of a survival is very low. They have to find this, and they use the real-time images to find this. And there are many questions related to this emerging phenomenon. One of those is the biogeochemical cycle and biogeochemical impact, because sargassum has a lot of carbon. 20% of sargassum dry biomass is carbon. Okay? It contains nitrogen, phosphate, and of course, pigments. So what are the roles of sargassum on this biogeochemical cycling? And that is the question remains to be answered. Of course, we can do many things. This is the picture I grabbed from the web. People are very smart. They use the sargassum to make bricks to build houses. Hopefully, this will build into an industry. And more than that, they use the sargassum to make shoes. I don't know how they do this. People are very, very smart. Okay? And if you don't really care well, Sargassum is not toxic, unlike a red tide. Green alva is not toxic either. If you don't care about the nasty looking or something, you can have fun with this. And this is exactly what happened. That's in West Palm Beach. Okay? People don't care. They just dive underneath to see what happened. Okay? Same thing in China. So there are a lot of opportunities and a lot of problems with this emerging Sargassum bloom, and also the microalgae bloom in the East China Sea. Okay? It opens a lot of doors for future research. And I want to summarize what we found from this. So both alva and Sargassum in the Yellow Sea, East China Sea, and Atlantic show dramatic increase in recent years, indicating a possible regime shift. I should put a question mark. Okay? Is this a real regime shift or just some oscillation, decadal oscillation? We cannot really address this yet. And the reasons can be both natural and unnatural. We have seen those. But exact reasons for the GASP, the Great Atlantic Sargassum Belt, are still unclear. Okay? Even though we can speculate on some hypotheses. But the recurrent blooms may become a new norm in future years, according to what happened in the past 10 years. Okay? Now, calling for more studies and management actions, I have to emphasize, compared to red tides, the golden tides or brown tides are understudied. Okay? If you check the literature, it's not proportional, the published papers. Okay? But as I said, this opens a large door to bring not just biology and chemistry, to bring also geology, okay, and physical oceanography, fisheries, tourism, economy management, and local economy impact, bring everything together. So this opens a large door. And hopefully, some of the students will put more time to address some of the questions. And there are a lot of questions to be addressed. This is one of the research topics my lab has focused on. We have other things. And I work upstairs in this building. If you have more questions, welcome to my office. With this, I stop and welcome your questions. Thank you.